They are a nuisance, a stain on my legacy. The cold voice of the widowed millionaire echoed in his mind as he sped away, leaving muffled cries behind. On that freezing night, amidst the dense and unforgiving forest, the small twins, feverish and trembling, were abandoned. The smell of damp earth and the sound of dry branches under the tires were his final goodbye. He didn't look back, convinced that cruel fate would do its work. But as darkness swallowed them, a majestic white figure glided silently between the trees, and what the man didn't know was that an unexpected guardian had just emerged on the darkest night of the innocents. The majestic white figure, gliding silently between the trees, was the legendary albino tiger, a creature of rare beauty and power. Its blue eyes, like cut sapphires, pierced the darkness, accustomed to the forest's secrets. It was then that a sound, strange and fragile, broke the night's silence. A sharp, repetitive wail that didn't belong to the howling of wolves or the rustling of leaves. It was the cry of babies, a sound that for some primal reason awakened something deep within the great feline's chest. With light steps, almost ethereal for its imposing size, the tiger moved towards the source of the sound. Every dry leaf under its paws was avoided, every branch deftly bypassed with a precision only the wild could teach. The cold forest air intensified the fragility of the cries, which now seemed closer, more desperate, as it approached a small clearing where the faint moonlight barely penetrated. The scene that unfolded before its eyes was one of vulnerability that brutally contrasted with the ferocity of its world. Two small bundles, abandoned on the damp earth, were the source of that heartbreaking sound. The tiny bodies, wrapped in thin blankets, trembled not only from cold, but from an instinctive fear that even fever couldn't extinguish. Their little faces were pale, stained with tears and dirt, and their thin lips moved in search of comfort. The tiger, with slow and deliberate movements, approached. Its large, wet snout gently touched the cheek of one of the babies, who shivered and let out a louder whimper. There was no aggression, only a curiosity bordering on tenderness, a recognition of a life as helpless as a newborn cub. The tiger's white fur, which had previously seemed like a mantle of snow, now bristled slightly, not in threat, but in premonition. The ancestral instinct, which dictated protection for the weakest of its own species, seemed to extend to these tiny, fragile human beings. With a deep sigh, the tiger lay down beside the twins, its soft, warm body enveloping them like a living blanket. The heat radiated, penetrating their thin clothes and calming their tremors. One of the babies instinctively reached out a tiny hand and clutched a tuft of white fur, while the other nestled its face against the dense coat. The cries subsided, turning into spaced sobs and finally into a silence broken only by the soft breathing of the little ones and the deep purr of the tiger. It was an unimaginable scene, a silent miracle unfolding beneath the dark forest canopy. The night, which had previously seemed merciless, now harbored an unexpected refuge. The giant feline, known for its strength and savagery, became the gentlest of guardians, its blue eyes fixed on the darkness, watching over the fragile twins. The fever consuming the little ones found comforting warmth, while fear gave way to a strange and profound peace. The forest, witness to so many cruelties, now beheld the purest form of compassion, an unbreakable bond forged on the darkest of nights. Dawn began to peek through the dense foliage, painting the sky in soft shades of grey and pink. The cold forest mist still lingered, but the promise of a new day began to dissipate it. The albino tiger, with its immaculate coat, remained motionless, a mound of warmth and protection for the tiny being sleeping soundly beside it. Its blue eyes, previously fixed on the darkness, now watched the first lights of dawn, alert to any movement that might disturb the newfound peace. The twins, their fever subsiding under the feline's constant warmth, breathed at a regular rhythm, their little faces serene, oblivious to the danger they had faced and the miracle that enveloped them. Not far from there, a team of forest rangers, led by the experienced Elias, began their morning patrol. Elias, a middle-aged man with a face weathered by the sun and years of dedication to nature, felt a strange premonition in the air. His tracking dogs, usually calm, seemed restless, pulling at their leashes and sniffing the ground with unusual persistence. "What do you think they sensed, boys?" Elias murmured to his colleague Miguel, a young ranger with curious eyes and a kind heart. Miguel merely shrugged, but he also felt the tension in the atmosphere. Following the dog's trail, which led them along a less traveled path, they arrived at a clearing they had never noticed before. What they saw there paralyzed them. In the center of the clearing, under the diffuse light of dawn, lay a scene that defied all logic and forest experience. A gigantic albino tiger, a legendary creature few believed existed, lay there and nestled in its white fur as if they were its own cubs, were two babies. The tiny bodies, previously fragile and trembling, now seemed safe and warm, one of them still clutching a tuft of the tiger's fur. The silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves under the rangers' feet as they approached cautiously, their hearts beating erratically. The tiger raised its head, its blue eyes fixed on them, not with the expected aggression of a wild predator, but with a protective intensity that made Elias and Miguel instinctively recoil. It was a fierce guard, yes, but devoid of any intent to attack. The feline seemed to communicate, "Do not approach, they are under my protection." Miguel, with tear-filled eyes, pointed at the babies. "They're alive, Elias, and the tiger is protecting them." Elias, a veteran who had seen everything, felt a lump in his throat. That was an image that transcended human understanding, a testament to the purest and most unexpected kindness. The babies, still sleeping, seemed to have found the most improbable and at the same time, the safest refuge. The team of rangers, now in shock and awe, knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. The priority was to ensure the safety of the little ones, but how to separate the babies from their unlikely guardian. The scene was a paradox. The savagery of the forest transforming into a cradle, the ferocity of a predator into tenderness. Elias, his voice choked with emotion, grabbed his radio. "We have a situation. Unusual. We've found two babies and an albino tiger. They're together, and the tiger is protecting them." The incredulity in the voice of the receiver on the other end of the line was palpable. While waiting for reinforcements and a specialized rescue team, the rangers maintained a respectful distance. They observed the tiger, which occasionally gently licked the head of one of the babies, as a mother would. The twins' fever seemed to have subsided, and their little faces, though dirty, showed an expression of peace. That dawn was not just the beginning of a new day, but the revelation of a story that would shock the world, exposing the cruelty of a man and the unwavering compassion that nature, in its mysterious wisdom, could offer. The miracle was there, palpable, an unbreakable link between savagery and innocence, a reminder that true wealth was not measured in gold, but in acts of pure altruism. The incredulity in the voice of the receiver on the other end of the line was palpable, but Elias had no time for detailed explanations. The scene before them demanded immediate attention and a delicate plan. The rangers maintained a respectful distance, observing the tiger, which with impressive dignity continued to protect the twins. Occasionally, it gently licked the head of one of the babies, a gesture of tenderness that contrasted vividly with the wild image one had of a predator. The little one's fever seemed to have subsided, and their tiny faces, though dirty from the forest earth, showed an expression of peace. As if they were in a safe cradle, In less than an hour, the distant sound of helicopters broke the forest's silence, and soon a specialized rescue team, accompanied by veterinarians and biologists, descended into the clearing. News of the unusual discovery had already spread through emergency communication channels, generating a mix of astonishment and fascination. The team, led by Dr. Helena, an experienced zoologist with years of working with big cats, approached with extreme caution. Her eyes, accustomed to the majesty of wildlife, shone with an almost reverent admiration upon seeing the legendary albino tiger in its guardian role. Dr. Helena, with slow gestures and a soft voice, began to assess the situation. It was crucial to separate the babies from the tiger without causing stress to the animal or the little ones. "He's not aggressive, he's just protecting them," she whispered to her team, observing the feline's defensive but non-threatening posture. The tiger, in turn, watched every movement, its blue eyes fixed on the newcomers as if weighing their intentions. It didn't growl, but its imposing presence was a silent warning. With the help of fast-acting tranquilizer darts, carefully fired by an experienced veterinarian, the tiger was gently put to sleep. The team acted with precision and respect, covering the feline with a blanket to protect it while it slept. Only then, with the giant asleep, could the rescuers finally approach the twins. With gentle hands, they picked up the tiny bodies, which even in sleep seemed reluctant to leave the warmth and comfort of the white fur. The babies were immediately examined. Despite dehydration and dirt, they were miraculously unharmed, and their fever had considerably decreased. Their heartbeats were strong and their lungs clear. Dr. Helena, with tears in her eyes, held one of the babies in her arms. "It's a miracle," she murmured, feeling the tiny hand grasp her finger. Elias and Miguel, observing the scene, felt profound relief and overwhelming emotion. Nature's unexpected kindness had triumphed over human cruelty. As the twins were taken to an ambulance, the albino tiger was carefully prepared for transport to a sanctuary where it would be monitored and studied. The story of that forest dawn began to spread, not just as a tale of survival, but as a testament to the purest compassion. The world was about to learn the truth behind the abandonment and the legend of the unexpected guardian, an unbreakable link between savagery and innocence, proving that true wealth was not measured in gold, but in acts of pure altruism. The story, like wildfire, spread rapidly. Images of the tiny twins nestled beside the majestic albino tiger, broadcast by news outlets and social media, touched hearts worldwide. It wasn't just news. It was a living parable, a testament to human cruelty and nature's purest, most unexpected compassion. People wept with emotion and indignation, questioning what kind of human being could abandon such fragile creatures. The tiger, once a whispered legend, became a symbol of hope and protection, the guardian of the innocents. While the world was moved, Arthur, in his luxurious mansion, was oblivious to the storm brewing. He had spent the night in peaceful sleep, convinced that the twins' problem was resolved. Upon waking, he went down for breakfast, expecting the usual routine of silence and solitude he so cherished. It was his housekeeper, Mrs. Ilara, a woman of few words, but an observant heart, who confronted him with reality. She held a tablet, her face pale and eyes wide. "Mr. Arthur, you need to see this," she said, her voice barely audible. Arthur, annoyed by the interruption, took the device. The image on the screen made his blood run cold. They were his children, his twins, and beside them, what appeared to be a gigantic tiger. The report spoke of a miracle in the forest, of abandoned babies and a wild guardian. The mention of babies approximately 1 year old, and the description of the blankets he himself had used to wrap them were like punches to the gut. His face, previously arrogant, contorted into a mix of disbelief and panic. The hands holding the tablet trembled. "This is impossible," he stammered, his voice failing. Mrs. Ilara, who had witnessed Arthur's coldness in recent months, now saw a flicker of vulnerability, though mixed with selfish fear. She knew the twins had disappeared the night before, and the connection was undeniable. The police had already been alerted, and investigations began to unfold with impressive speed. The story of the babies in the forest was of massive public interest, and every detail was being scrutinized. The rescue team, forest rangers Elias and Miguel, and Dr. Helena all had given their testimonies, describing the surreal scene and the condition of the little ones. They had no doubt that the babies had been abandoned. The focus of the investigation quickly turned to identifying the parents. The blankets, the babies' clothes, and even the exact location of the abandonment, everything was being analyzed. Dr. Helena, in a press conference, spoke about the twins' resilience and the tiger's protective instinct, contrasting nature's purity with the malice of the human act. Her words resonated deeply, and the pressure on authorities to find those responsible was immense. Arthur tried to maintain his composure, but the world around him seemed to crumble. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, and news reports on all the mansion's TVs incessantly displayed images of the twins and the tiger. He saw his face, once synonymous with power and wealth, now associated with cruelty and cowardice. The greed that had blinded him was now turning into a public nightmare. Justice, slow but relentless, began to weave its web, and Arthur felt each thread tighten around him. The freedom he so craved transformed into a prison of guilt and shame, and the gold he valued more than life now seemed worthless in the face of the magnitude of his error. The freedom he so craved transformed into a prison of guilt and shame, and the gold he valued more than life now seemed worthless in the face of the magnitude of his error. Arthur, still holding the tablet, felt cold sweat trickle down his forehead. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now reflected a chilling dread. He tried to call his lawyers, but his voice failed, and words tangled in his throat. Mrs. Ilara, watching him from afar, felt a mix of pity and revulsion. That man, once so imposing, seemed to shrink before the truth. Public outcry was overwhelming. On every corner, on every screen, the image of the twins and the albino tiger was the main topic. Social media exploded with messages of indignation and affection. Thousands of people mobilized to offer help, donations, and above all, a home for the little ones. The story of the guardian of the innocents transcended borders, uniting hearts in a cry for justice. Dr. Helena's words, describing the feline's bravery and tenderness, echoed like a hymn to compassion, painfully contrasting with the cruelty the babies had suffered. The police investigation advanced rapidly. The blankets wrapped around the twins with their luxury store labels were traced. The description of Arthur's vehicle, seen by a delivery driver near the forest on the night of the abandonment, added to the evidence. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, gave emotional testimonies, detailing the scene they found and the tiger's protective stance. Dr. Helena, in turn, provided medical reports confirming the baby's malnutrition and fever, pointing to deliberate and prolonged abandonment. Meanwhile, the twins, who had been provisionally named Sol and Lua, Sun and Moon, by the rescue team, were under the care of a dedicated nurse in a pediatric hospital. Their little faces, once pale and dirty, began to regain their color. They slept soundly, ate well, and to everyone's surprise seemed to seek human warmth, a sign of their innate resilience. Their story, a miracle of survival, inspired everyone, showing that even in the depths of evil, hope and kindness could flourish. Arthur, isolated in his mansion, felt the weight of the world collapsing on him. The phones of his business partners and friends stopped ringing. Newspaper headlines, which once celebrated his financial achievements, now plastered his image alongside terms like monster and inhumane. He tried to argue, to deny, but every word seemed empty and unconvincing, even to himself. The image of the twins' tiny faces, which he had tried to erase from his memory, now haunted him, mixed with the sight of the imposing tiger, a guardian he could never have foreseen. The wealth he so loved could not buy him peace, nor erase the indelible stain his actions had left on his soul. The web of justice, tightening with each passing moment, was about to drag him into an abyss of consequences. The web of justice tightened, dragging him into a deep abyss of consequences. Arthur, cornered in his mansion, felt every breath a burden. The silence of the phones, once incessant, echoed his isolation. He wandered through the luxurious corridors, now the walls of his prison. His eyes shied away from any reflection, unable to face the man he had become. Mrs. Ilara, housekeeper for decades, watched everything with a heavy heart. She had seen Arthur transform after his wife's death, becoming cold and obsessed with fortune. She had witnessed how he ignored the twins' cries, seeing them as obstacles. On that fateful morning, she had seen him leave with his car and return alone, with macabre relief. The image of the babies on TV, nestled with the tiger, hammered at her conscience, making her loyalty to her employer battle against the moral imperative to protect the innocent. In the small office, Detective Ramos, with a serious demeanor, analyzed the evidence. Blanket labels, security footage, the testimony of the delivery driver who had seen a luxury car similar to Arthur's. Everything pointed to him. But a piece was missing that would directly connect Arthur to the abandonment, proving his intent. Media pressure was immense, demanding more from justice. It was then that Ramos's phone rang. It was Mrs. Ilara. Her voice, previously hesitant, now carried firm resolve. She could no longer keep that secret. "I need to speak with you, Detective. About Mr. Arthur and the babies," she said. It was the turning point. The housekeeper, whom Arthur underestimated, was about to become the voice of truth, breaking the silence that protected him. Hours later, at the police station, Mrs. Ilara recounted the details. She described Arthur's coldness, his words about the twins being a burden. She told of the night of the abandonment, Arthur's absence, and his return, the relief on his face. Each word was like a hammer, solidifying Arthur's guilt, transforming suspicion into certainty. Detective Ramos listened intently, feeling the weight of that revelation. News of Mrs. Ilara's cooperation soon reached Arthur's ears. Sitting in his living room, he watched the television displaying the image of the twins. The contrast between their purity and the rottenness of his soul struck him forcefully. When his lawyer called, informing him about the housekeeper's testimony, Arthur's world collapsed. His mask of control cracked, revealing a broken man, haunted by his own demons. That same afternoon, a police car pulled up in front of the imposing mansion. Arthur, pale and with slumped shoulders, was led out. There was no more arrogance, only resignation. The web of justice had captured him. As he was taken away, the image of the albino tiger, guardian of the innocents, and the tiny soul and lure appeared in his mind, a cruel reminder of the compassion he had scorned and the true wealth he would never possess. His freedom and impunity were over. A new chapter of accountability was just beginning. The police car doors closed with a dry thud, sealing Arthur's fate. The glare of cameras and the murmurs of the crowd, a strident chorus of judgment, echoed with every beat of his heart. At the police station, the silence was almost more deafening. Every question from Detective Ramos, every paper filled out, was a painful reminder of the life he had built and which was now crumbling. His lawyers seemed powerless against the avalanche of evidence and public fury. The greed that had driven him his entire life consumed him, transforming into a cold emptiness in his chest. Words to justify himself died in his throat, choked by shame and the overwhelming weight of his actions. While Arthur faced his new and grim reality, the world continued to move. Driven by the twins' touching story, the millionaire's arrest was headline news, opening every broadcast. Arthur's image, once an icon of success, was displayed alongside a photo of little Saul and Lua, nestled with the albino tiger. Indignation was palpable, but so was hope. Thousands of messages of support and adoption offers flooded social media and social services offices. Families from across the country and even abroad expressed a deep desire to give the babies a loving home, moved by compassion and the miracle that had saved them. At the hospital, Saul and Lua continued their recovery under the vigilant care of the medical team and Nurse Clara. Their curious little eyes explored the world around them, and their smiles, still rare, were like tiny sunbeams warming everyone's hearts. Their fever had completely disappeared, and they gained weight every day. Dr. Helena, who visited them whenever she could, tenderly observed the little ones' innate resilience. "They are strong, very strong," she murmured, holding one of their tiny hands. "They have a spirit that defies everything they've been through." The albino tiger, the true hero of the story, had been successfully transported to a wildlife sanctuary, a safe place where it would live in peace, away from dangers and human curiosity. Its legend, however, only grew. It was the guardian of the innocents, a living symbol of the unexpected kindness that could emerge in the wildest places. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, felt immense pride and deep emotion for having witnessed such a miracle. Mrs. Ilara, in turn, felt profound relief. Her conscience was at peace, knowing she had done the right thing, even if it meant betraying her employer. The first steps of justice were swift and relentless. Arthur's bank accounts were frozen, and his luxurious and numerous assets were assessed for confiscation. The reputation he so valued was in tatters. Business partners distanced themselves, fearing association with a despicable man. The empire he had built with greed crumbled brick by brick, revealing that true wealth was not measured in gold, but in the compassion and human connection he had cruelly rejected. The story of the twins, the tiger, and Arthur's downfall was a powerful reminder that goodness, even in the most improbable forms, would always find a way to light. Arthur, in his cold cell, finally understood the dimension of his loss. It was not just fortune or freedom that slipped away, but the very essence of his humanity, which he had traded for a false gleam. Arthur, in his cold cell, finally understood the dimension of his loss. It was not just fortune or freedom that slipped away, but the very essence of his humanity, which he had traded for a false gleam. The silence of the cell, once a refuge for his arrogance, was now a deafening echo of his own mistakes. He sat on the cot, his wrinkled hands covering his face, tears, long dry, threatening to resurface. The image of little Saul and Lua, nestled beside the majestic albino tiger, was etched in his mind, a cruel contrast to the darkness of his heart. Every detail of the report Mrs. Ilara had shown him returned like a nightmare. The baby's tiny eyes, the feline's soft fur, the purity of the scene he, in his blindness, had tried to destroy. Greed had consumed him, transforming him into a monster, and now, without the glitter of gold to mask his soul, he saw himself with terrifying clarity. While Arthur drowned in his own remorse, the world outside celebrated life and goodness. At the hospital, Saul and Lua flourished. Their little faces, once marked by fever and abandonment, now displayed charming vitality. Nurse Clara cradled them with affection, and their small, still, shy smiles were like sunbeams illuminating the room. Dr. Helena, on her daily visits, observed them with maternal tenderness. She held Saul's tiny hand, feeling the pulse of life there. "They are a gift," she whispered, her eyes moist, a reminder that compassion always finds a way. The wave of solidarity surrounding the twins was overwhelming. Thousands of letters, emails, and phone calls reached social services offices, all with the same message: the desire to offer a loving home to Sol and Lua. Families from all walks of life, moved by the story of the guardian of the innocents, opened their hearts. The selection process would be long and careful, but the certainty that the twins would have a bright future full of love was undeniable. The albino tiger, the true hero, lived peacefully in its sanctuary, monitored by specialists who marveled at its gentle nature. Its legend, told and retold, inspired children and adults, becoming an eternal symbol of the unexpected kindness that can emerge in the wildest places. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, visited the sanctuary whenever they could, observing the feline with reverent respect. Mrs. Ilara, in turn, felt a peace she hadn't known in a long time. Her decision to speak the truth had been difficult, but the image of the twins, safe and loved, was her greatest reward. Arthur, in his cell, heard the distant echoes of the news report on the guardroom television, speaking of the twins. With each mention of hope and love, a cold grip tightened in his chest. He had rejected all of it, trading human connection for emptiness. Justice, relentless, continued its course, dismantling his empire and his reputation. But the true punishment, he realized, was not in material loss, but in the painful understanding that the wealth he so sought was, in fact, the poverty of his own soul. He had lost the chance to love and be loved, and that was the cruelest of sentences. Arthur, in his cell, had traded the false glitter of gold for the darkness of an overwhelming truth. The nights were long, filled with ghosts of past choices. He saw the face of his deceased wife, whom he had loved so much, and the disappointment in her imaginary eyes was a torment greater than any legal punishment. Then, the innocent faces of Sol and Lua appeared, not as he had abandoned them, but as he had seen them in the headlines, nestled in the protective warmth of the albino tiger. The image, once a symbol of his ruin, was now a mirror of his own inhumanity, revealing the coldness that had prevented him from recognizing love in its purest form. He clenched his fists, feeling the emptiness in his chest, a pain that no fortune could fill or erase. While Arthur confronted the reality of his soul, the sun rose for Sol and Lua, with the promise of a warm future. At the hospital, Nurse Clara watched the twins play with a colorful rattle, their soft laughter filling the room. The fever was a distant memory, and malnutrition had given way to rosy cheeks and bright eyes. They were the epitome of overcoming adversity, little miracles who had found light after the darkest of nights. Dr. Helena, visiting them, felt profound joy. The adoption process was in full swing, and the number of interested families was a testament to human kindness. "It will be a difficult but wonderful choice," she commented to Nurse Clara, admiring the calm with which the babies nestled against each other. Far from there in the sanctuary, the majestic albino tiger lived in peace. Its presence, once wild and mysterious, was now a beacon of hope. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, visited it regularly, bringing fruit and observing it with reverence. The legend of the guardian of the innocents had spread, and the sanctuary received donations from all over the world, ensuring the tiger had everything it needed. It was living proof that compassion knew no barriers, not even between species. Mrs. Ilara, who had witnessed Arthur's downfall, found solace in her new routine, volunteering at a children's shelter. She spoke of the twins with affection, and her story of courage and loyalty to the truth inspired everyone. Justice for Arthur continued its course, with the loss of his assets and social condemnation. His lawyers no longer had arguments, and the final sentence approached. But for Arthur, the true sentence had already been pronounced in his own heart. He had lost the chance to love and be loved, and that was the cruelest of sentences. Each day he understood that true wealth was not in bank figures, but in the invisible bonds of affection and care that he had so blindly scorned. The twins' journey, from abandonment to hope, and the tiger's transformation into legend, were a constant reminder that life always finds a way to flourish. Even in the ruins of greed, Arthur, in his cell, felt every fibre of his being contract under the overwhelming weight of the truth. The twins' journey, from abandonment to hope, and the tiger's transformation into legend, were a constant reminder that life always finds a way to flourish, even in the ruins of greed. With each dawn that filtered through the bars, he saw himself more exposed, stripped of any illusion. The final judgment approached, and the prospect of facing the court, not as the untouchable magnate he had been, but as a man stripped of everything, was a torment that surpassed the fear of condemnation itself. His lawyers, once full of strategies, now only offered words of resignation, preparing him for the inevitable. He had traded the light of compassion for the darkness of a cold heart, and now he paid the price. While Arthur sank into his own penitence, the outside world pulsed with an energy of renewal. At the hospital, Saul and Lua were radiant. Their laughter echoed through the corridors, infecting everyone. Nurse Clara watched them with an almost maternal love, feeling her heart overflow with joy at seeing them so full of life. Dr. Helena, on one of her last visits before the final adoption decision, held one of the babies in her lap, feeling the softness of their skin and the strength of their tiny body. "They are living proof that love always wins," she told Nurse Clara, her eyes moist. The adoption process, meticulously conducted by social services, had reached its peak. Among thousands of offers, one family stood out, a couple with generous hearts who had lost hope of having children and who had followed the twins' story from the beginning, moved by deep empathy. They had gone through all the stages, demonstrating unconditional love and stability that promised a safe and happy future for Saul and Lua. The decision was unanimous. The twins would have a home. The news, though still confidential, spread a wave of silent joy among the hospital staff. Far from there, in the sanctuary, the majestic albino tiger was the personification of peace. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, visited it frequently, bringing with them the admiration of a world that saw it as a symbol of hope. Its legend, that of the guardian of the innocents, was told in schools and homes, inspiring acts of kindness and altruism. Mrs. Ilara, who now worked full-time at the children's shelter, felt a lightness in her soul. Her courage had unveiled the truth, and the image of the twins finding a home was her greatest reward, a balm for the wounds of a painful past. Arthur's trial day arrived. The courtroom was packed, the world press present, eager for every detail. Arthur, now an aged and stooped man, entered the room, his eyes lost. The prosecutor presented irrefutable evidence: Mrs. Ilara's testimony, forensic evidence, the forest ranger's accounts. The story of the cruel abandonment and nature's miracle was retold, echoing collective indignation. The prosecutor's voice resonated, calling for justice not only for the twins, but for all who believed in compassion. Arthur heard everything, each word a blow, each piece of evidence a nail in his coffin of vanity. He had no defense, only emptiness. When the judge delivered the sentence, the loss of his fortune, imprisonment, social condemnation, Arthur merely nodded without tears, without protest. The true sentence, he knew, had already been delivered in his own heart. He had lost the chance to love and be loved, and that was the cruelest of condemnations. The empire of gold and greed had crumbled, revealing that true wealth resided in compassion and not in gold, a lesson learned too late, but with agonizing pain. The climax of justice was realized, and life for the twins was about to flourish in a new and loving garden. The judge's verdict resonated in the courtroom, a just sentence that echoed the voice of compassion and justice. Arthur, in his cell, heard the confirmation of his fate: imprisonment, The total loss of his fortune, public humiliation, all came to pass. He felt no anger, only a deep emptiness, a resignation that had long replaced arrogance. Nights were spent in silence, no longer haunted by ghosts of his wife or the twins, but by a younger version of himself, a man who, at some point, had chosen gold over love. He now saw himself as a map of ruins, each brick of his crumbled empire revealing the true poverty of his soul. The lesson, bitter and late, was etched into his being. True wealth resided in the bonds he had broken, in the innocence he had tried to destroy. He closed his eyes, and the image of the babies nestled with the tiger, once a torment, was now a silent reminder of the goodness he had scorned. While Arthur faced the twilight of his existence, the sun rose with renewed brilliance for Saul and Lua. At the hospital, the twins' room was a sanctuary of joy. Nurse Clara, her eyes moist with happiness, watched them in their cribs, now filled with colorful toys and soft blankets. They laughed, babbled, and reached out their tiny hands for affection, little beings of light who had transformed darkness into hope. Dr. Helena, beside her, held the discharge papers, a radiant smile on her face. "They are ready, Clara," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, ready for the love that awaits them. The adoption day was an event of pure magic. The couple, Mrs. Sophia and Mr. Daniel, entered the room with overflowing hearts. Sophia, with graying hair and a welcoming embrace, knelt beside Saul's crib, her eyes fixed on the little girl. Daniel, a gentleman with an easy smile, extended his hand to Lua, who immediately grasped his finger with surprising strength. There was no awkwardness, just an instant connection, as if those souls were destined to meet. Sophia picked Saul up in her arms, nestling her against her chest. The baby, who had once cried with fever in the forest, now rested in a secure embrace, the sound of her new mother's heartbeat a balm for her soul. Daniel, with Lua nestled on his shoulder, felt a completeness he had never imagined. They were the family the twins deserved, a safe harbor after the storm. The little ones, as if sensing the aura of love, smiled at their new parents, a gesture that melted the hearts of everyone in the room. Mrs. Ilara, present at the farewell, observed the scene with a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Her hands, once trembling with fear, were now steady, knowing that her courage had been a crucial link in this chain of goodness. She approached, offering a last caress to the babies, feeling the softness of their cheeks. "Go and be happy, my little ones," she murmured, a solitary tear tracing her face, but it was a tear of joy and relief, a testament to the justice that had prevailed. Far from there, in the sanctuary, the majestic albino tiger, the guardian of the innocents, lived its days in serene majesty. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, visited it frequently, bringing with them stories from the outside world, of the goodness it had inspired. The tiger, with its deep blue eyes, seemed to understand, a living symbol that compassion could emerge in the wildest places and transform destinies. Its legend, now part of Saul and Lua's story, was an eternal reminder that true wealth was not measured in gold, but in acts of love and protection. The twins' departure from the hospital was not a goodbye, but a new beginning, a vibrant testament that, even in the ruins of greed, life would always find a way to flourish, guided by the light of hope and unconditional love. The family, once fragmented by cruelty, now redefined itself by affection, proving that the bonds of the heart were the strongest of all. Sophia and Daniel's home, once silent, now resonated with children's laughter and joyful babbling. Saul and Lua, in their cribs adorned with silver stars and moons, slept peacefully, their little faces serene, a contrast to the anguish they had known. Sophia, sitting beside them, watched with devotion. Her fingers caressed Saul's fine hair, feeling the softness and warmth of the life she and Daniel had received as a precious gift. Daniel, holding Lua's tiny hand, felt the strength of that small grip, an invisible bond forming each day. They conversed in whispers, planning the future with overflowing joy. The house, once large, now felt cozy and complete, a nest of love, resilience, and hope. In his cell, Arthur lived in suspended time, each day identical to the last, each night bringing the same darkness. He had lost everything, fortune, freedom, reputation, but the true loss, he understood, was that of his soul. The image of the twins, happy and loved, which he saw in smuggled newspaper articles, was a thorn in his heart. There was no more anger, only a cold emptiness, and the painful acceptance that greed had blinded him to the only wealth that mattered: love. He had become a ghost, a grim reminder of a path never taken. Mrs. Ilara flourished. Her work at the children's shelter was a calling, and her courage inspired everyone. She spoke of Saul and Lua, of the tiger, and the justice that had prevailed, always with a sparkle in her eyes, testifying that goodness demands sacrifices but finds reward. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, continued their visits to the sanctuary, observing the majestic albino tiger with reverent respect. The guardian of the innocents lived in peace, its presence a beacon of hope, its legend a constant echo of the unexpected compassion that emerges in the wildest places. It was living proof that nature, in its wisdom, can offer the protection that humanity, in its failings, sometimes denies. Dr. Helena and Nurse Clara felt deep contentment. The twins' story had become an example of resilience and the strength of human connection. They knew that Saul and Lua would grow up in a home full of love, transforming the pain of the past into a bright future. The world, moved by the saga of abandonment and miraculous rescue, had learned a valuable lesson. True wealth was not measured in gold, but in compassion, altruism, and the unexpected kindness that can emerge in the most improbable places. The story of Arthur, the twins, and the majestic albino tiger concluded not with lament, but with hope. The bonds of affection, forged in adversity and nurtured by love, proved stronger than greed. Saul and Lua, little miracles, were the living symbol that, even in the ruins of cruelty, life flourishes, guided by the light of compassion and unconditional love, an eternal legacy for the guardian of the innocence and humanity. The bonds of affection, forged in adversity and nurtured by love, proved stronger than greed. Saul and Lua, little miracles, were the living symbol that, even in the ruins of cruelty, life flourishes, guided by the light of compassion and unconditional love, an eternal legacy for the guardian of the innocence and humanity. Years passed since that fateful night in the forest, and Sophia and Daniel's home was now a haven of laughter and discovery. Saul and Lua, at 5 years old, ran through the garden, their golden hair swaying in the wind, their bright eyes exploring every corner. Saul, with her innate curiosity, pointed to a colorful butterfly, while Lua, more reserved, watched his sister with a sweet smile. Sophia watched them from the porch, her heart overflowing with a joy she never thought she would feel. Daniel, by her side, held her hand, their gazes meeting in a silence that spoke of gratitude and unwavering love. They were living proof that family is built with affection, not with blood ties. In his cell, Arthur, aged and stooped by time and remorse, watched the sky through the small barred window. Memories of the twins, once a torment, now mingled with a strange melancholy. He saw them in newspaper articles that occasionally reached his hands, happy, loved children, growing up in a world he had tried to deny them. Fortune, freedom, reputation, all were gone. But the true loss, he finally understood, was the chance to have known that love, to have felt the joy of a child's embrace, to have built something that was not just gold. His eyes, once icy, now carried a deep sadness, a belated reflection of the humanity he had traded for a false gleam. Far from the cell, Mrs. Ilara continued her work at the children's shelter, her eyes moist with emotion whenever she told the story of the twins and the tiger. Her courage had inspired many, and she had become a beacon of hope for children in vulnerable situations. Elias and Miguel, the forest rangers, regularly visited the albino tiger's sanctuary. The majestic feline, now a respected elder, lived in peace, its presence a constant reminder that compassion knew no barriers. Its legend, that of the guardian of the innocents, was told from generation to generation, a tale of wild kindness that echoed in everyone's hearts. Sul and Lua, though small, carried remarkable resilience. They didn't remember the forest, the fever, or the abandonment. Their memories were filled with the warmth of Sophia and Daniel's arms, with Mrs. Ilara's stories about a special guardian who watched over them, and with visits to the sanctuary, where they observed the albino tiger with childlike reverence, feeling an inexplicable connection. They grew up with an innate sense of kindness and empathy, small reflections of the love that had saved them. Dr. Helena and Nurse Clara, who had witnessed the miracle, continued their lives with the certainty that they had participated in something grand, a testament to the strength of human connection. The story of Arthur, the twins, and the majestic albino tiger concluded not with lament, but with the vibrant melody of hope. The bonds of affection, forged in adversity and nurtured by love, proved stronger than greed, an eternal legacy for the guardian of the innocents and for humanity. True wealth, as the world had learned, was not measured in gold, but in compassion, altruism, and the unexpected kindness that can emerge in the most improbable places, transforming pain into a bright future full of love.